core economic goals for China during the 15th five-year plan?
The core goal is a high quality growth. When we say high quality growth, that means few dimensions. The first issue is really technology advancing. AR, of course, is in everybody's mind, but not only AR, it's really like a quantum computing, like a nuclear fusions, like a robot, and with physical AR. Because China accounted, for example, 52% of global robot investment last year, but real core issues give them brain, which is a physical AR. I think that technology advancing is the core part of the whole five-year plan. Based on that, when we move to domestic consumption, right? Domestic consumption is weak, and we need to lift the domestic consumption, put whole economic growth basis our own foot. I think that's a big strategy. Enhance the manufacturing continuously and integrate technology with the manufacturing. We call it AI plus manufacturing, and also expanding service sector. I think it's also important. China don't have a strong service sector at all. We consume roughly less than 1% of entertaining. It's very small, and less than 1.5% of GDP on tourism, 4% on education, and 7% on healthcare. So we need to rebuild the whole service sector with the AI plus base. I think that is very important. Chinese company will go abroad with current trade situation, trade war, tariff, those things. That's a big change. But most importantly, we'll go very much on the greener growth, because this is a new growth model. China benefit tremendously from green transformation. So China will keep carbon neutrality in mind, keep climate change as a key goal in the next 5 years. So those are a few core pillars for the 15th five-year plan. So I call it a high quality growth.
How will high quality development be concretely reflected during the 15th five-year plan?
I think we'll see a few things. Number one, we want to see a very stable growth, is number one. Number two, we want consumption growth stronger than GDP growth, because we want to exploit domestic consumption. When people consume, we need the money. So we will see the income growth rates were higher than GDP growth rate. Also, because it's most important thing for people is the quality of life. So government budget expenditure will have a more proportionally spendings on the social program. So that means the social program expenditure in budget will increase stronger than GDP growth. I think that those things you will see very much nailed down into the human side of the growth.
What will be the main focus of expanding domestic demand during the 15th five-year plan?
I think that the first is domestic consumption demand. I think that this is very important.
Right.
So we use all the tools. For example, currently the subsidies on durable goods purchasing, stimulus domestic consumptions, give all the different part of clear signals require the consumption growth stronger than GDP growth, for example. So I think domestic consumption is a big demand, is number one. Number two, the high-tech investments also a big demand. I think that we now see more and more technology advancing in Chinese economies, and also you need to do more investments. I mean, China actually did very well in the energy side, power, grid, but we need to move to data centers, move to cloud, move to chip industries. So a lot of new infrastructures need to be built. I think the high-tech investments will form another important form of demand. And also, I think that China will continue to export to the world, also import as well. We have both. We'll export more, which will become international demand, but we'll import more service as well. So bring more real benefit to the Chinese people as well. So you will see demand will come from different dimensions. But the whole thing is because China have a very strong supply. Everybody understands that. So in the next 5 years, and form a strong demand become the key issue here, as you mentioned.
If we could just change tracks to the global economy in China, what conditions would make China-US trade negotiations successful?
Oh, there are a few things. I mean, there's still very high tariff,
Yes.
and the U.S. levied on Chinese goods. Particularly, 10% of fentanyl doesn't make very much sense, right? Because China don't produce anything on fentanyl side. China even don't produce the raw material. We really manage it very carefully on the raw material side. So I think the U.S. need to cut this 10% extra tariff on fentanyl. I think that's issues. The second issue is general lower the tax rates for Chinese exports. I think that would be good, because when you have a high tax rates and you increase domestic consumption price and consumer pay more, right? So it's not good for U.S. So cutting the tariff, I think, is the first step. The second step is China can import more American goods. We talk about soybeans, energy. There are a lot of things that we can do, but there are many other things China. Actually, China imports a lot of manufacturing from U.S., high-tech manufacturing. So in fact, the China manufacturer, the U.S. manufacturer very much are in one supply chain. I think so that's import more American goods is important, and particularly in service sector. And the U.S. is very strong in service sector, right? And that's their strength. So I think it's a win-win situation. China export goods to U.S. and the U.S. export service and the resource to China. I think that's the way we can make a good trade deal. The good thing is I think that both sides sit down to talk and realize both economies compromise each other. So that's the way to do the trade. I'm positive to see a good trade deal come out in this year.
How should China position itself in global economic governance and international cooperation mechanisms?
I think the first important thing, China support the UN-based the system.
Right.
I think that's the most important thing, right? Because since World War II, the whole world spent such a big effort to build the whole system, and we need to stay on it. And stay UN system means you have to stay the rule-based system.
Right.
It's also WTO.
Yeah.
This is the second most important thing. China support WTO,
Right.
continue to fulfill the responsibility of the WTO. I think this is also very important part of China's international responsibility, right? This is support the rules, support the UN system, as Minister Wang Yi just emphasized this morning. I think that's get a lot of consensus from audience in the room, so I can feel the atmosphere vibrating across when Wang Yi say China strongly support the UN system. That makes it very, very clear, and support the rule-based system. I think this is number one important.
Strong message.
The second important issue is China gradually grow into a second largest economy, right? Which is good for China, but China is also happy to provide the experience, captures technology to the other world, part of the world, particularly to the global south, right? So help everybody to work together. So China do a lot of investments in many other places. For example, Ngozi just mentioned in a panel with me, China put $22 billion in infrastructure investments in Africa. And the rest of the world total is just $2 billion. So you can see, China is happy to share the Chinese experience and Chinese developments with the whole world. I think that's also. And there are a lot of things Europe can do, since we're in Munich, right? I mean, there's a lot of things. Let me point to one thing on green transformation. China going to peak in the next few years. Before 2030, China committed. But when you peaked on the carbon emission, what do? You need to cut them things down,
Right.
which is not easy. Europeans reached the peak in 90s.
Right.
So gradually they're coming down to carbon neutrality.
Yeah.
China's going to peak in the next few years, gradually coming down. From peak to neutrality is a big, big challenge. It's very different things.
Sure.
I think China can learn tremendously from European experience. So, and this Europeans have a lot of green technology as well. So both sides can work. For example, China started its carbon neutrality with the renewable energy. Solar, windmills, EVs doing so well. But now the solar cost is lower than oil and gas as a coal, China going to move a more broader green economic development. That means China start to greener steel, cement, and chemistry. So in all those areas, European has a lot of experience because they went through in the past 20, 30 years. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for both sides to work together in the green area. Although some country leave the table after after climate change, right? But I think the world want to continue the climate change issues. I think there's a huge area both sides can work together.
You just mentioned there the Chinese investment in Angola, and there was quite a big trade announcement made today between China and Africa. Could you just explain a little bit more about that?
Yep. I think that the big issue is that China will lower the tax rates to all the African countries when they export to China. I think that's very, very important. Open the whole Chinese market to the Africa region. I think that this is very important issues. The second issue is, and the Chinese capital will go abroad, will go a lot of the Africa regions, and will work with the local company to develop its own company. The very interesting is the way the artificial intelligence advancing so fast. For countries in Africa, it don't have to repeat the UK way. Like old industry, labor-intensive industry, move gradually to high-tech to service, as we did in the past 50 years, and the UK did in the past 200 years. But now, leverage on artificial intelligence, you will be able to build a cleaner and more effective manufacturing in Africa. I think that this is the fundamental issues. And China is willing to do a technology cooperation with the countries. And also, most important thing in this deal is China will be happy to provide the credit to help the African country to build the infrastructure. Because if you want to see the real green manufacturing or high-tech manufacturing, the government need to provide infrastructure, which is long-term. I think the big issue is China is committed to the region continent and long-term investment in technology infrastructure. That's the future.
Speaking of technology, how can China leverage innovation and digitization to sustain this long-term growth?
I think that's a good question. The first issue is the technology move very fast. China model is quite different from US model. US artificial intelligence model is big and heavy. Big model, big data sets, and also very expensive. Chinese model is small and open sources, cheap, right? So Chinese model is very popular in the world and also particularly in the United States. The first most used model in the US is not the OpenAI, it's Ali's Q1.
Right.
The second is Kimi 2.5. They are Chinese because the cost is only roughly 10% of the OpenAI. So this makes a huge difference. Where you have an open source model, when the model is so cheap, adaptation becomes easier.
Sure.
So the whole way is now China try to use this artificial intelligence as an infrastructure, change in the fundamental way for domestic economic, service, manufacturing, right, and green transformation. So I think that this is the way technology provide a long-term sustainable growth assurance for the future.
What challenges then and opportunities do you see for China's tech and green transition industries?
I think the most important thing is the technology always evolving, move very fast, right? The really issue is the global cooperation is the key issue. Technology moves so fast. We have to think about, for example, the risk, the governance of artificial intelligence. We have to think about the boundaries. We have to think about how do we create a safe, a good artificial intelligence for the next generations. So today, the technology innovations go far beyond only one technology. It's an ecosystem. It's an environment. It's a cross-generational issue. You need to create the whole thing for next generation. So I think those the whole big issue. So China take a more systemic way, look about the whole thing in the broad sense, but also in the cross-generational sense. I think that's the big challenge because involving social change, structure change, regulatory framework change, and international cooperation change. So that's the need the whole world to work together.